Okay, so just a quick update on the EU referendum, lead up to the EU referendum. I was in Newcastle today and I bought some material on this. There's an enormous amount of coverage of this, as you can imagine. These are just some examples. Newsweek, Prospect is leading on Tony Blair, but they also have information there on the European referendum. The Economist, Week, they always have witty, satirical cartoons. China Daily, this is an English language publication. That's an interesting look at the Chinese perspective on Brexit. And Der Spiegel, which is a German publication, but they have a special here on Brexit. And English language version or English special on that. The Financial Times and many other publications. Um, Again, this video is not going to be laying out what way I'm going to vote. I honestly still have not cemented that. I will say at this point, I'm still more swayed towards Remain. When I finally do make my decision, I'll make a video explaining why. Um, for this, I just want to make an update on some of the situations that are going on. I will make an update on the situation of Jo Cox. Obviously, her murder has been very dominant in the last week, and today in Parliament, MPs, as a gesture, wore the white rose of Yorkshire in their lapels and blouses. There was two roses put in the seat that she would usually sit, the white rose of Yorkshire and the red rose, which is a symbol of the Labour Party. So that was a nice gesture, I thought. Tributes from both sides of the House. Andrew Mitchell, who is a Tory MP, quite well known Tory, he was on the committee with Jo Cox for Syria, and he paid an interesting tribute to her. So has been bipartisan, which is nice to see. David Cameron was campaigning today with Harriet Harman, so there has been a lot of examples of bipartisan work. I think that's a good thing personally. On either side, I also think it's a good thing on the Leave side. You know, members from different parties working together. Here in the UK, we've long had a partisan attitude. That is to say that the British have always, or let's say, been used to uh, single party governments in the sense that it's always been Labour, Tory, Labour, Tory, Labour, Tory. We seem to have this reaction to different politicians from different parties working together, almost a cynical attitude, and I don't really know why. I think it's a positive thing to see, and I think it's something that should be welcomed. Um, I just want to make a quick reference to something that has been alleged this week. The Leave side is now starting to accuse the Remain side of exploiting Jo Cox's death for political means. Um, I'm not so sure of that. This event happened days before the European referendum. If Jo Cox hadn't been murdered, we would have been seeing massive coverage on this both ways. I haven't seen a huge amount of evidence of solid evidence of her death being exploited. Of course, it was a big event. She was the first MP to be murdered in 26 years, so it is a big story in its own right. I see nothing wrong with the Prime Minister quoting the things that she has said. Jo Cox was an energetic MP, and if she were still alive, she would be campaigning. So I think part of the tribute to her is continuing her legacy of being politically active. I don't think it is disrespectful, or I don't see that as exploiting her death. She was a politician. That's what she done. Um, I mean, if I don't know if a doctor died in tragic circumstances, and other doctors wanted to continue his or her legacy by, I don't know, improving medicine or something, would people say, "Oh, they're exploiting it"? I don't think so. Um, it's not as if David Cameron is saying this MP was for Remain and everyone on Leave is racist. The Prime Minister hasn't said that directly. I will say this: it is very, very important that we don't allow ourselves, we as citizens have a responsibility not to use irresponsible language. So I'm more pro Remain. That doesn't mean that I think everyone who's going to vote Leave is a horrible racist with a Little Englander mentality. Definitely, definitely not. I know people in my own life, acquaintances, I know they don't have that mindset. By the same token, not everyone who wants to stay in the EU is an elitist. So let's just stop with these lazy generalizations. But there is one basic fact about what happened with Jo Cox. She was murdered by a far right extremist who had extremely strong anti EU views. Now, I don't know how talking about that is the same as scaremongering or exploiting her death. It's just stating a fact. She was murdered by a far right extremist. It's a fact. So when someone on the Leave side is saying, oh, the Remain side are exploiting this, well, all they're doing is pointing out what happened. I mean, if it had been the other way around, let's say, for example, someone prominent in UKIP or one of the Leave MPs was murdered, I have no doubt that the Remain side, some on the Remain side, would be saying, "Oh, you're exploiting that person's death." The fact is, Jo Cox was pro Remain. That's what she was. It's not something that the Prime Minister's just making up. That's what she was. So I don't agree entirely that this is being exploited. In cases where people may be exploiting it, that's wrong. But I haven't seen much evidence of that. Katie Hopkins has been rambling along those lines and making that point. To be quite honest, I have contempt for Katie Hopkins. I think she's a despicable human being. I wouldn't even be mentioning her if it wasn't in this particular context. As far as I'm concerned, Katie Hopkins has done nothing positive for this country. Zero, zilch. And that's not because of her political views, it's because of the way she goes about her political views. Um, she's just a poisonous person. I mean, she's like Jeremy Kyle and Donald Trump rolled into one, and all the negative aspects of those two rolled into one. She's a nobody that has been propped up to be a somebody. She's not an elected politician. She's not a business leader. She's not a credited journalist. She's just a very loud, very obnoxious, very divisive, and in my opinion, very horrible person. I don't know if I could be in the same studio with her, to be quite frank. I really don't think I could sit in the same room as Katie Hopkins without losing, without really, there's people I disagree with. There's people I disagree with strongly, but there's some people, it's a very small number of people I just cannot stomach. She is one of them. Um, and, those on the right who think that's a lefty statement, it's really not. If you're a decent human being, you should see that the way Katie Hopkins goes about things is repulsive. This is the woman who not long ago proposed machine gunning migrants. This is the woman who called migrants cockroaches, which is the same language that was used in the Rwandan genocide. I believe she is a fascist, and that is a term that gets thrown around a lot. But I believe in her case, it really is the case. I believe she basically has a fascist mentality, and I think she's disgusting. So, I don't think that people who think that the death of Jo Cox has been exploited should use Katie Hopkins as some sort of role model to prop up their argument, because Katie Hopkins has a track record of being incredibly divisive. She's incredibly self serving. She hasn't shown an ounce of compassion for any other human being. Why do we keep propping her up? People say, oh, what about freedom of speech? Well, I've never ever said that she can't have her opinion. I'm just questioning why she is constantly given a platform that she doesn't deserve. Because she's a nobody. She's not an elected politician. She's not a leading business person. Who is she? She was on The Apprentice. That's it. And she's been propped up to be some sort of right wing icon. Uh, this makes me sick, to be quite honest. Um, anyway, I'm going to round the video up because I just wanted to make a few updates. On my thoughts at present, as I've been doing. I am getting more swayed by Remain, but I'm going to tell you something. It's not because of fear. It's not because of scaremongering. I'm more swayed by Remain because I am listening to what a lot of influential people are saying who support Remain. The majority of major businesses support Remain. The majority of leaders around the world support Remain. Now, it's easy to say, oh, they just have vested interests, but that is a hell of a lot of important opinions to just dismiss. And just for the record, I completely and absolutely respect the voters. If you are watching this video and you are voting to leave the EU, I've nothing against you. I totally support your right to do that, and I actually totally understand it as well, because I am not slavishly enthusiastic about the EU. I still haven't voted. I could still vote out. I'm just saying that I'm more swayed to the Remain argument at this stage. I think in terms of the polls, I think the Remain side is now in the lead. Whether Joe Cox's death has had an influence in that, no one can be sure about that, but it may have had. Which would be wrong. People shouldn't be voting on that. That would be, ridiculous. But that's just a few of my thoughts. If you are for leave, obviously it's wrong to tarnish all leave people with. I agree with Nigel Farage about that particular point. You can't say half the nation is racist. Of course not. Ian Duncan Smith made an interesting point today. I'll just show you one thing. In in Newsweek, they had a very, very balanced article. They had Sadiq Khan for Remain and Ian Duncan Smith for Leave, and it couldn't have been more neutral. They had it split page, side by side. I'll just see if I can find this. Yeah, I mean you couldn't get any more fair than this. Now I have to say, Sadiq Khan made a lot more optimistic argument. Ian Duncan Smith's argument just seemed to be gloomy. If you've read this particular article, I'm not saying all of the arguments are. Although he did make a good soundbite where he said that it's not about little England, it's about little Europe. So, both men made fair points, but I am more persuaded by Remain. This doesn't mean I'm slavishly pro EU. Still haven't voted. I could still vote leave yet. That's all I'm saying. I'm going to watch a lot more videos. I'm going to read a lot of this information. This is pretty, there's all sorts of opinions here, so it's pretty balanced. Um, I have never been so unsure about a vote in my life as I am with this, and that's saying something. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you disagree with anything I'm saying, as usual, that's fine, but please keep it respectful. If you are for leave, I don't think you're a racist. At least in most cases, you're not. There are some racists on the leave side. There's no question about that. But there are probably some racists on the Remain side as well. Um, but I'm just more persuaded by Remain at this point, and I will make a video explaining my reasoning for whatever way I vote. Thank you for watching.